So like imagine being able to go in and like take a shot of nanites that are like little mini robots that could go and deliver medicine to specific pieces or parts of your body. So if you're thinking like cancer cells, right? That's huge. Right? Being able to deliver chemotherapy hits all the cells of your body. Imagine if you could just like poke into a cancer cell, release whatever medicine or whatever methodology that you want to do to reduce or destroy that cancer cell into just that targeted cancer cell, as opposed to affecting the whole body. That's like an example. But nanites and nanotechnology, I really feel like in the future will be just stuff that is floating around our body in our bloodstream.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Executive Health and Life. I'm your host, Julian Hayes II, where the goal is to have you maintain your edge and your status and ultimately be the CEO of your health and life. And today we are going to talk about the brain. The brain is, I think about anatomy class during my brief time in medical school. And I remember going to the cadaver and playing with the brain. And I was like, wow, all the little grooves and crests. And the next thing I thought about for some reason is that these things look like a walnut. And then I looked up, what the walnuts are good for. And I was like, it's good for your brain. And so then I started looking up other foods that are also shaped like different parts of the body. And they connected with each other. Whether that's a coincidence or not, I have no idea. This just came to the top of mind as I'm making this intro. For those who don't know, my intros are totally just ad-lib and I just make it up. But back to the brain here. Something when we think about aging is that we're afraid of losing our cognition as we take more trips around the sun. And so today I'm talking with a guy who's a brain researcher and an entrepreneur. He's doing some really, really fascinating stuff, very cutting edge. And he is the co-founder of a company called Mind, Brain, Body Lab, which is utilizing neuroscience and AI to work alongside traditional therapy to help those that are healing from the effects of burnout, emotional abuse, breakups, and many other different types of quarter-life crisis and identity crisis that we can have. Essentially, he's here to help us rewrite and rise up. So I'm speaking with none other than Cody Isabel. Cody, how's it going today?
It's going good. Thanks. I love the ad-lib. I love the ad-lib bio. It's way more fun than the canned, like just read the script type thing. So that was good.
Well, I appreciate that. I've messed up a few times too, and you just kept rolling with it.
Right.
I thought about taking an ad-lib, or not an ad-lib class, an improv class, just to even get more out of my comfort zone. Because one of the things for me was I was always told myself I was an introvert. Mm-hmm. And that I couldn't do certain things because, that's not what I do. And I was essentially programming and wiring my brain to be this person because I kept affirming what I am. So as we start here, I'm curious, how did you, if we go back to 8-year-old Cody, did we know from that point on to present day that he was going to be a brain researcher and into AI and neurotech?
I would say yes, for sure. When I was really young, I don't know what grade 8 is. I forgot what grade that is. I just know in elementary school at some point, there was a fair, like a exhibit, I guess, like a live exhibit of the human body that came through my middle school at St. John's, like out in, KC, Kansas City. And so, it essentially what it was like a giant blow up human body, and you could walk through it essentially. So like one of those bouncy houses, it kind of was like that, except it was like there's no bouncing. You walked through like a live blow up version of the human body, and you start at the top of the head and go through the brain. And so when I went through that, I noticed that the rest of the time walking through the rest of the body, there was these yellow little things like going all over the place inside the body. I was like, what the hell is this? Like, and I noticed those first in the brain and the head, and then it went all through the body. And I was like, what the heck? And so that was the first time I learned what a neuron was or what nerves were. And I was just fascinated. I was like, this we walked through this at the very beginning, but it's been with us the entire time we've been walking through this exhibit. So what the hell is this? Like, what is the nervous system? What are nerves? What is the brain? How does that work? And I was fascinated from that point forward. Gotten some advanced classes in, like some advanced college classes in high school, even around the brain, around neuroscience. And then took that all the way into college, get my degree in cognitive behavioral neuroscience. And then the rest is history. Working with people in their brains has been really, really fun, especially how like physiologically what's happening upstairs and in your nervous, in your mind, brain, and body, and how that affects your behavior and emotions and things like that. So I would say yes, it for sure had to do with the brain. And then I've always been interested in technology as well. Not necessarily, not always specifically like neurotechnology, biotechnology, things like that, but just tech and exponential technologies in the future. I'm extraordinarily, like, I love superheroes. I love the future. I love Jarvis from Iron Man, all that kind of stuff. And so once I started to take that from like, understand that the comic books and sci-fi and that kind of stuff, a lot of the times are like predicting the future. I'm like, okay, so what types of technologies could lead to the things that I love about in these stories and stuff like that? And that's when I really dove further into neurotechnology, biotechnology, nanotechnology, and really integrating like machine learning, AI, deep learning, those types of things into what I'm doing. So
interesting. Is Iron Man your favorite superhero?
On the Marvel side, maybe. I also like Doctor Strange. On the DC side, I'm a big Superman guy. I love Superman. Everybody's like, "Oh, he's overpowered," but I just love that, and I think he's badass. So I've always loved Superman.
I'm more of a Batman person, and
Fair enough.
Yeah, my favorite Batman in the movies was Ben Affleck. That was like a dream to see on the screen.
Wow.
Because he was absolutely jacked, right? This is how I wanted my Batman to be. He was a little broody, and he wasn't really that funny. And so I probably sound like a downer right now, but I don't like my superheroes to be cracking jokes too much. They can throw a little joke here and there. And so just the way that Batman was portrayed was, to me, closer to the comic ones that I like. So that's why I enjoyed that Batman. And also, for me, Batman's just a dude with like different tech and gadgets. And when I think about health, and kind of what inspired me was that I was like, he's just a normal dude that trains really hard and leverages tools. And so I was like, I can look at health like Batman, and I'm going to leverage all these different, vitamins, supplements, peptides, all this stuff to really enhance myself to the best of my ability. So I'm like, I'm Batman.
I like that.
So
that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. And so I was curious. That's why I asked this, because you mentioned Jarvis and Iron Man, and they're really big into the brain and technologies and I would say meshing those worlds together in a very effective way. So nanotechnology, for those who may not be familiar, what's nanotechnology?
I mean, it's just like that. I mean, we're getting on the very edge of like what is like real, but it's a type of biotechnology that, like, when people talk about having little like microscopic almost robots that can go in your body and start to heal and change your body. So like imagine being able to go in and like take a shot of nanites that are like little mini robots that could go and deliver medicine to specific pieces or parts of your body. So if you're thinking like cancer cells, right? That's huge. Right? Being able to deliver chemotherapy hits all the cells of your body. Imagine if you could just like poke into a cancer cell, release whatever medicine or whatever methodology that you want to do to reduce or destroy that cancer cell into just that targeted cancer cell, as opposed to affecting the whole body. That's like an example. But nanites and nanotechnology, I really feel like in the future will be just stuff that is floating around our body and our bloodstream. That will be able to do anything from ibuprofen up to like actual like vaccines, maybe. That could get controversial for people, but vaccines or just even antiviral, like different types of medicines and stuff that could be released into our bodies in measurement. Like what's happening? What is your blood? Like how hard is it right now to get your blood glucose? Like I partner with Nutrisense, so I have a patch that can get my blood glucose, but not everybody has that. And right now it's a patch. In the future, it will be something that's floating in our blood that will already be able to give us all of the data on our blood. We'll know our cholesterol. We'll know all of these things already because those types of things are floating around in our body. Kind of creepy, but I think it's cool.
Creepy but cool. I like that. That's some real life Marvel DC stuff right there, right?
It is.
You know,
Yeah, it
like I
is.
like I could use that to heal a sore foot right now, so I can be at 100% when I go for my run later today. I'm a little inflamed in my elbow. These nanobots, they can go in there, work their magic. My elbow feels like new, and I can go do my bench like I want to do with the barbell at the weight I want without any elbow pain. That's
Right.
I'm sold on that. The only thing I worry about, okay, so like I don't even know if we have the answers
That's
to that yet.
really future tech. So
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not working on. I'm not doing a lot with nano myself at the current
yeah,
moment, but I know about it.
yeah. The only thing I'm curious, which we probably don't even have fully the answer yet, is like who controls that? You know,
Hmm.
because
Yeah, I love that question though.
it's tech and everything. So like, who controls that? And because it's getting more data into us, so I think that will be the only thing I would have to say. Okay, who controls this and has access to this, and can you like turn it on and off? And things like that. But this is me just with I don't have a tinfoil hat. This is just me if I'm putting my tinfoil hat on, and I wanted to think about worst case scenarios but there's a great
It's a
book I read.
legitimate question.
There's a great book I read. It's called Only the Paranoid Survive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have to stay a little healthy paranoia is good for you.
Yeah, man, it's a good question. Data is a big, 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 big question right now. When you think
Mm-hmm.
about AI, which is like nanobots, neurotechnology that like Neuralink that'll be in your brain, like
Mm-hmm.
those are years away probably. But AI is here today, and the data question is still hugely important for AI, even because the like ChatGPT and all these language models or like AI models that you see are trained on data, and that's the future. From my perspective, is data, and so data privacy, data protection for consumers, I think will become more and more important. And right now, like individual Cody and Julian don't have much sway in
Mm-hmm.
what how our data is used. Because if I go to Google or I go to Facebook as me individually, Cody by himself, and I'm like, hey, I don't like this, blah, 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 like change and make this different, blah, whatever. That's one ant out of billions and Facebook's just like, yeah, I don't care. But in the future, I really think there will be things like data unions or data DAOs, like decentralized autonomous organizations that where it's not just me or it's not just you, but now we have, what if we got a billion people in this data union? I don't know a better word than union at the current moment. And now collectively, we go to Facebook with 3 billion of its users and we say, hey, this is what our terms are for you to be able to use our data. And that is voted on by the entire community. And you can kind of pick and choose what data guild or data union, whatever you want to be a part of, and how your data then is used. And then companies can interact. But it gives us more collective bargaining with these giant corporations and future ones as well, not just for AI, which is today, but nanotechnology, neurotechnology, biotechnology, so that we have more of a say on what's happening with our data collectively. And
Mm-hmm.
then I think the technology providers will need to do some cool stuff. Like I'm very interested in data protection. Like how can like Apple stores your data
Mm-hmm.
on device in a chip on your phone that's technically yours. Still a little bit, most consumers probably don't understand that or know why that matters or anything. But I've even thought about having like a personalized blockchain that can store your memories, that's encrypted with like you are the one with the encryption key and you're the only one who can access something like that. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways that I've kind of thought about the data question, but it's an interesting one.
Yeah, it's a very important one as well. And I think about this. We'll jump over a little bit. I'll go to the future a little bit, and then we'll come back to kind of some stuff in the present. I hear about all of these different technologies, and we even talked about this previously before off camera about some of the cool interventions in technology out there, and a lot of it is pretty pricey right now. So a lot of people are priced out of it. And so
Mm-hmm.
one thing that caught my interest was that you're, one of the things that you are working on and have a vision for is to create affordable human machine nanotechnology devices and software tools. So I guess my question here is, how is that an issue of scaling then? How would you be able to accomplish that if it's kind of very pricey technology in there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. The hardware, the hardware side, there's a lot that goes into that. I haven't even probably started attacking that issue or problem yet. The software side is a little bit different. There's some cool models like we're doing, and that's where I'm way more focused right now is like software and AI side. Hardware is something that I think will come in the future. There's a lot of R&D, research and development that needs to happen on college campuses and universities and things like that to actually make it possible. But big picture, if you think of something like Squarespace, or you think of something, or not Squarespace, sorry, Square, the little card reader, the story of how they were created is similar. And when you think of like Henry Ford, like I read a ton of autobiographies and biographies. I love them. But when you think of like Henry Ford, you think of Microsoft, you think of these companies that got things to the mass market, D2C, or like direct to consumer, to the consumer market. They are figuring out ways to keep it cheap and effective. And something even Henry Ford said is like, it's not an innovation if poor people can't afford it. If not everyone can afford it, it's not innovation. So how do you get to that place? The Square card reader did the same thing for small business owners and like entrepreneurs. They couldn't get business credit cards. Like they couldn't get a line of credit. And so when people would like your local glass blower or whatever, couldn't accept a credit card. So they were missing out on thousands and thousands of dollars of sales because people had to use cash. And if you couldn't accept a credit card, then they would just walk out of your store. Square was like, well, why is no one servicing that market? And so what Square realized is that these giant corporations were attacking the very top tier, like the billionaires, the multimillionaires, the millionaires, but they were missing out on the mass market, which had like 10 times the amount of people and consumers inside of that bottom layer of the pyramid. And they did not understand that if they could create a solution for the mass market, that would create like economics of scale, or they'd be able to scale that in a way, because if a billion people pay you $1, that's $1 billion. Where and the credit cards companies didn't necessarily understand that or see that, or they missed out on that opportunity. Square didn't miss out on that. Same thing with Henry Ford, same thing with Microsoft, and some of these early innovators that are trying to get stuff to the mass market. So I'm trying to follow in their footsteps, and trying to use patterns and things that people have already used to take stuff to the market, and trying to deliver something that's extraordinarily high quality for a lower cost, like Amazon does this too, and be able to get to a large mass market. The first way I'm doing that is content. That's an easy way to do it. So I do a lot of content where I'm teaching people stuff for free. So that's one way. And then soon we'll have a digital product. And so the specific way that we're creating like an AI companion, like a Jarvis, if we're sticking with the superheroes from Iron Man, an AI companion for between therapy sessions that can help people regulate their nervous system, talk through traumatic things, listen, understand, and validate them. And it's a little companion avatar that is like your little buddy. And the goal with that is to not charge for it. Like I want to do like a pay what you can model. We're technically incorporated as a public benefit company, meaning that I am not solely focused on shareholder value. I am focused on serving the public and creating something of massive value to the public and helping them. And so that's kind of the way that I'm focused on right now, is being able to create a model that is like either pay what you can or just completely, totally free. I like the pay what you can model because it's like, okay, if Julian can afford to pay $30 a month so that he can pay for 4 other people's memberships or whatever on the app, awesome. Then 4 people that can't afford mental health care at the current moment could get those services for free. And I kind of like that because it kind of brings together more of a community vibe and like a joint mission, and not just free. So I don't know. I'm working on that, trying to figure out how to do that. But that's those are some of the ways that that was a long way to say some of the ways that I'm trying to solve that problem.
What was the inspiration around mental health? I know that's very important to you. So
for sure, mental health has been, first of all, I've always loved, but studying cognitive behavioral neuroscience, there's a lot of, I got to understand the neuroscience of what's happening in a lot of these mental illnesses, mental health, that kind of stuff. I've started a couple companies and probably took too much on all at once. And starting a company is stressful, and I was struggling with anxiety myself, and just like I started having panic attacks and all sorts of stuff. I was like, what the hell? So it's affected me personally. And then one of my best friends struggles with, or has struggled in the past with some mental illness type things. I've had to, it's been tough to see what he's had to go through and some of that kind of stuff. So that's really where it came from. And then being able to help people with their mental and emotional health, as far as like confidence and helping them heal some of those past wounds has been something I've been passionate about since I was younger, even like high school, college. That's probably where it all started, because my own mental and emotional health, like my social skills, my confidence, like those types of things were very, very bad
Mm-hmm.
when I was in like high school. And then in college, when I transitioned to college, I created this persona called Izzy, based after my uncle, whose Uncle Aaron is his name, but
Mm-hmm.
Izzy is the nickname he used. It's like a family nickname. My uncle's a badass. He was in Vietnam. Like he like was the dude that like breached first, and then when he's around my family, when he walks in the room, everybody listens. Like he takes action. Like he's a badass. I love him. And so I met with him right before I went to college, and I was like this, like lanky, like I'm a pretty tall guy, like, but I was lanky, no muscle, like acne, like no facial hair, like just an awkward phase. And I presented awkwardly and couldn't talk to people and wasn't like confident necessarily. And so, in college, when the first day of college, I got there and I was like, hey, everybody's like, who are you? Essentially, like it's orientation. I was like, hey, my name's Cody Isabel, but everybody calls me Izzy. And so I just transitioned to, I'm going to become Izzy. And that persona instantly gave me the bravado and the confidence of my uncle. And so Izzy allowed me and helped me do a lot of cool stuff, stuff that I would not have done as Cody necessarily. And I grew into that. Now I have those powers, those superpowers internally, but I learned them by being someone else, right? Izzy. And so that's the first moment that I was like, oh my God, like, this you're having this alter ego, having this new identity can really help with mental and emotional health. I started to research that and started to look into multiple personality, multiple self theory, internal family systems, which is a type of psychotherapy I'm trained in, and kind of looking at subpersonalities and how our identities and our personalities and our identity, like how it all meshes together and how it works together, how they can help with behavioral change, mental and emotional health. So that's probably where a lot of it stemmed from. All of those different pieces is what I would say.
That's very interesting because I too created an alter ego. That's one of the things I learned when I went to therapy is I started to create an alter ego for myself.
Hell yes.
And
Yes.
and to do that. So I really loved hearing that, because an alter ego is a person that, I say that if this Julian can't do it, my alter ego can. He'll pick up the slack in this department. He's a lot more tougher than me. He's a lot more. I needed the toughness and the confidence and the swagger. That my other person didn't have. Yeah, he may have had the intellect, but he didn't have that swagger and charisma and confidence and edge to himself. And so,
hell yeah.
So I definitely dig that. As we get ready to start diving into the brain, by the way, you create a lot of content.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I do.
I'll have this in the show notes, but people, you got to go to you got to go to their Instagram page, because they are creating consistently very, very high quality content. So, it was almost too much when I was researching you, but but I found I found a simple article to kind of get us started, where you talked about this, and you went very viral on this post as well. You talked about 5 activities to keep the brain healthy. Now, listeners know sleep. We're pretty aware of that. We might dive into that a little bit. We know meditation. We know exercise. We know limiting alcohol. And but the 5th one was what was very interesting. You mentioned becoming more actively decisive. And your quote was, our brains are made to decide things and act things, and we learn through failure. And in the process of act, access, and adjust helps improve overall brain health. It's a very interesting one. Now, how'd you come up with that? Was that through experience or through research?
Both, honestly. I mean, research first, like understanding and learning how the brain learns, how memories are formed. Failure is literally a neuroplastic trigger. Like the way your brain triggers neuroplasticity is through failure and through errors. Error is the more scientific word, but error or failure. And then when you look at as someone who's studied science pretty deeply, I'm sure you're familiar with the scientific method. If you look at act, assess, adjust, that is the scientific method. I've simplified it down a lot for the general public so people can understand it, but at its core is the scientific method, which the scientific method is like, what's my hypothesis? What do I think is going to happen? Or what's my research question? Like, I have this thing, this phenomenon is happening. What's my research question? What's my hypothesis about why it's happening? How am I going to test that? Go test it. Review your results. What happened? Was my hypothesis supported or not? And then going and adjusting and shifting your hypothesis based on the results, and to go and experiment again. That's the scientific method. Act, assess, adjust is a scientific method for the average consumer, or the average person that you can use in your life. And so that's kind of where act, assess, adjust came from. And then the learning and the becoming more decisive. It's just a lot of what I see when I work with people is they're stuck, whether it's with confidence or after trauma. Action is a really, really hard concept for people to understand, and getting into action. And I feel like it's a lot of times because they think action is one thing. It's not they just think I have to just act and that's it. And they're worried about failure. When I act, I fail. If I fail, then that sucks. It's not a fun feeling. But if you have the concept that you act, assess, and adjust, that it's feedback, not failure at all times. Like, it's a feedback loop. And so I talk about that a lot. And that's what your brain is literally made to do. Like, I think like the most common example of this is everybody learns how to walk by falling on their ass a ton of times. Why do we stop doing that? Right? Like, you use that process as a child. Society then starts to, and you can see this in school data, society starts to guilt and shame and humiliate and things like that in relation to getting things wrong and not being right, not being perfect. And so we forget this core mechanism of learning that lives in our nervous system, which is act, assess, adjust. And we stop doing it. We stop learning and we stop acting. We stop being decisive because we feel like making this decision means the end of the world, when in reality, all it means is that right now you're going to act and do this thing. Then you're going to say, oh, that did not work. Shit. And then reassess, act again, adjust, and then act again. If that's the concept, then action is not as scary because you always have the ability. Like, I can't even think of a single example of time that I failed that I wasn't able to assess the issue, adjust, and then act again. It's never, ever, ever been something I haven't been able to do. So.
And so you mentioned neuroplasticity. In case for those not familiar with neuroplasticity, what's just an easy way to think about neuroplasticity?
Just your brain's ability to learn and grow. So like you can read a book and learn something new today and remember it tomorrow. Your brain changed, and the neural network of your brain changed as you learn that. Even as you're listening to this podcast, your brain is changing. The neural connections are shifting and changing. That's neuroplasticity. It's just your brain's ability to adapt and grow over time.
And then, so I imagine then that's where sleep comes into play as well, right?
Oh yeah. Sleep literally is. Without sleep, you could not learn. And so what happens when you're learning is you release a whole slew of cool little chemicals that help you form that memory. So when you are learning, there's a certain set of neurons that are firing, a certain pattern of neurons that are firing in relation to the task or the thing you're trying to learn. Acetylcholine, when you start to error, when you start to guess wrong, when you start to not be able to piece things together, that error triggers acetylcholine to be released, and it acts like a spotlight on those neurons that are that firing pattern of neurons that are firing while you're learning. Acetylcholine spotlights them. Epinephrine is also in there, helps you with like focus and drive to keep going. And then dopamine comes in and like lays down its tracks on those lit up neurons, and it marks those neurons for change, to be reconsolidated essentially. And so then what happens is if you do not sleep, those connections fall apart. But when you sleep, what happens is actually kind of cool. Like when you dream, a lot of the times you can see the reverse pattern in your brain fire. So if you fire ABC while you're learning it, in your dreams, it's CBA, essentially that you can see it in people's brains and brain scan and stuff. Doesn't matter. Point being is while you're sleeping, your nerve cells come in and they find the acetylcholine that has marked the neural pathway. that you just lit up while you were learning, and then it consolidates those and sears in those, like if they were like loose connections like this, now it sears them in and locks them into an actual new neural network, a new neural pathway in your brain as you're sleeping. And so sleep is so freaking important for learning, memory, and focus and attention, because if you don't sleep, first of all, you don't have enough acetylcholine, epinephrine, dopamine to help you learn while you're awake. And so that's bad for focus and attention and learning. And then if you don't sleep, you don't reconsolidate your memories in the same way. So then you won't remember what you learned as well. So yeah, sleep is huge in relation to learning. Like you have to sleep to learn.
Now, with dopamine, are we a lot of these devices and everything? Now, is that giving us is that kind of messing with our dopamine pathways in terms of like just getting hits of dopamine way too much now?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's extraordinarily in the literature. It's like very clear that our dopamine. Dr. Anna Lemke wrote a book called Dopamine Nation. Love her to death. She was on Dr. Andrew Huberman's podcast. She's been all over the place, but Dopamine Nation. She dives like so deep into this topic. It's not even funny. She talks about something called a pleasure pain balance, and if you think of it like a little teeter totter, every time that you release like, let's pretend it's just 10 units of dopamine, just random whatever units, okay? If you release 10 units of dopamine, after that, there are 10 units of pain that are released as well. So when you release dopamine, you have to release a similar amount of pain chemicals, there's like after you eat a bowl of ice cream, right? There's like a level of like almost pain that urges you to take another bite, or you take one bite of a cookie. What makes you take that next bite? Well, it's that small amount of almost like pain or discomfort that's like, I really want that, and that's this mechanism at play, this pleasure pain balance. And so when we are hyper dopamined up, like social media, drugs, sex, porn, all sorts of stuff like that, shoots your dopamine levels up. Guess what? You have to have an equal and opposite reaction of pain in relation to dopamine. And so when you look at the United States, we are the most stressed, depressed, and anxious of all countries. And we also have the most dopaminergic type activities in our society, in our food, like so much sugar in our food, on our social media, in like the general media, our activities, like we have extreme stuff that we do and extreme things that we talk about, which shoots up our dopamine, and it then messes up that pleasure pain balance. And so then we're more stressed, depressed, and anxious than anyone else. And it makes complete sense. Neurobiologically, what's happening societally, and that's the argument she makes in this book. And I am 100% a firm believer in that, like without a doubt.
Wow.
It's wild. It's wild.
That is wild. And so, that's affecting our focus and our attention spans and our performance across the board. And a lot of times, and that's also desensitizing us to a lot of like nominal experiences, right? Isn't that the reason why people have to continually amp up things just to feel something throughout the months and incoming years, is because their dopamine is essentially shot.
Yeah. I mean, literally their threshold for getting the same pleasure, they get desensitized to it. Literally. I mean, it's an addiction loop.
Wow. I need to do, I think I want to do an anti-dopamine diet.
Oh yeah. Is
that such a thing?
Oh yeah, it is. Dr. Anna Lemke, in her book, she gives a protocol called dopamine, and it's a 30-day dopamine detox to reset your pleasure pain balance. And you can absolutely do this 100%. There's some caveats she gives, like for example, like benzodiazepines or alcohol. You've got to be extraordinarily careful with those. Those are very, like, they send a lot of dopamine, but you've got to be really careful. Like when you're withdrawing from some of that stuff, that's not the same as like coming off of like sugar, or like if you're like watching too much porn or something like that.
Yeah.
That's different than alcohol. Alcohol can truly can kill you withdrawing. So she gives some tips on how to do that in a framework literally called dopamine. So it's kind of cool.
Damn. So if somebody's really drinking a lot and they just go cold turkey with alcohol, it can kill them.
Oh yeah. 100%. Like alcohol withdrawal is very, very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
to same thing with benzos a lot of the
Hmm.
time, like strong benzodiazepine. Like Jordan Peterson, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but
Hmm.
again, maybe a controversial guy, but he went off some benzodiazepines, and it took years for him to get off of those. It, like medically had to be observed in a hospital to get off of some of these drugs. Um, Alcohol similar to that, but yeah, if you're coming off something like that, absolutely, please God, do that with a medical professional at your side.
Wow. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because a lot of times you just hear, "Hey, I'm just going to stop and stop." I know I've heard of alcohol. You heard of Alcohol Anonymous and 12-step programs and stuff, but I didn't know it was just that serious that you can lose your life from alcohol if you have a serious dependency to it. Wow, the
Yeah,
body is
yeah, that's a big disclaimer. It's like if you were
yeah,
addicted to alcohol, it's not
yeah,
like the person that's like just a random college person or whatever,
yeah,
like binge drinking. Like that's different. I'm talking like someone that is like dependent on it,
yeah.
daily
Hmm.
drinking, that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, and this is a pretty good segue to move on to other things that our brains kind of become dependent on, or that really affects our brain. One of those is trauma, and
mm,
when I hear trauma, uh, sometimes I feel like it's being overused.
mm,
Just the way that I don't think it. I think the way we think about trauma probably doesn't have much like aging. I think it's been too watered and just messed up. So trauma. What do you when you hear trauma? How do you talk about trauma with people?
yeah, so there, I mean, there's tons of ways to slice it. There's big T trauma, little T trauma. Like big T trauma being things like neglect at childhood or abuse, like verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, um, like being sexually assaulted. That's like big T trauma can be. Also, seeing your buddy at war blown up next to you, that could be big T trauma. Little T trauma is can be more like over time. It can be more less like there's a lot of people that if they grow up super religious, there's some little T trauma sometimes that can come up in relation to like guilt and shame. Um, there's so that's like one way to slice it. The easiest way that I like to slice it is with the three E's. I talk about this a lot. Um, and the E's are event, experience, and effect. And so if you think about what could be traumatic for you may not be for me. And it can build some empathy from my perspective in understanding what is trauma because it's such a crazy overused word. I agree. And
Yeah,
so when you're thinking about, let's pretend like a house fire, for example, if it's your house, right, that event of the house fire, you might experience some anxiety, some nervousness, like some terror, some fear, because you got to go get the kids, you got to go get all your stuff out, your stuff's burning down, and then the effect of that experience and that event could be traumatic, PTSD, stress, anxiety, things like that afterwards. However, if you're a firefighter, the same event is experienced completely differently. If you're a firefighter, that a house fire is a very common event, and it's maybe the fourth house fire you've gone to in that night or day, right? And so you experience that house fire completely differently. For someone who is a firefighter, they might have the effect of that event and experience might build resilience and might help them learn how to navigate that more effectively, which is completely different than how the person whose house is on fire experienced that. So one is considered, could be considered trauma, and the other is building resilience.
mm,
Not to say that firefighters and things like that don't experience trauma, they absolutely do. But just for benefit of kind of understanding what trauma is, that's an easy way to kind of understand it. Um,
I like that. I like that. I like that whole differentiation and segmentation there, and then also the three E's, and then also leading to better, more compassion. I think some of the traumas I hear sometimes in C is usually the micro traumas
mm,
that and I think my thing is like a lot of those micro ones tend to overshadow some of the more serious ones, the big T's, like you mentioned, and even the
mm,
small T's. And I think that's where I think my initial thinking was from. So I like that you distinguishing that. And so I'm curious. So the protocol, the process. and you can't go through it all, obviously. But so when someone's coming with trauma and getting ready and attempting to heal that, how are you combining the AI component with traditional therapy?
So the way to think about, there's a couple ways. Big picture understanding trauma neurobiologically is important to understand how this works. And so if you think of your mind, your brain, and your body as three separate things that are inseparable, which is kind of a conundrum, but most people have kind of a basic understanding that your mind, your brain, and your body are kind of different things. And so what happens in trauma is that there's senses, things that come in through your body, through your brain into your mind. And your mind is like, oh shit, this is intense. I can't handle this. I cannot cope with this, which is another way to define trauma, like something that escapes your ability to cope. Like you don't have coping mechanisms to handle what you're experiencing. And so your mind is like, holy crap, I can't deal with this. And so then your mind goes back to your brain. It's like, hey, I can't deal with this. Hold on to this memory. Hold on to these emotions for me. And the brain is like, well, I have nerve cells. I have no place to store this information. I can't keep this in nerve cells. So I have to send this back down to the body. And so then your brain then sends signals through your hypothalamus, through your endocrine system, through your immune system, back down and shoves that trauma into your body. And so it can be stored in your muscles, your fascia, like the interconnection, the matrix that connects all of your organs, muscles, and cells, which is your fascia. And then it can be in your skin, things like that. And so it shoves these traumas and these traumatic memories back into our bodies. And so that's really important to understand in relation to trauma, is that there's a lot going on. Trauma is stored in your body. It's remembered, it's stored, it's felt in your body. And that's huge to remember because a lot of traditional therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy, if they're not trauma informed, a lot of the times they'll have people just reliving their memories and talking about what's happening in their mind. But what's the problem with trying to talk and heal trauma with just going to the mind? It's stored in the body. And so when you're working through the mind, there's only one type of memory in the mind, which is like declarative. Like I talked with Julian, I got on with Julian, I talked with him, and then I got off. That's declarative, like forward progress memory. I can do that in my mind, in my prefrontal cortex. However, trauma is stored in my body, which is non-declarative, meaning I can feel it, I can sense it. Emotions come up from my body into my experience, but I can't necessarily like talk about it always. And so when you are doing traditional types of therapies and you're going top down, working just in the mind to talk through this stuff and this trauma, it's sometimes, especially for trauma, it's not always effective. Just doing talk therapy alone. Working in a modality that works with the body is super, super important. Because that's how you actually release trauma, and it's how you release the grip of trauma on your psychology. The way I like to think about it is trauma. Imagine your body like the soil for your brain, and your brain like the soil for your mind. So trauma gets stored in your body, and it creates a toxic environment, toxic soil, essentially. That means your brain is planted in toxic soil. So your brain becomes inflamed, low-grade brain inflammation. That low-grade brain inflammation creates toxic soil in your brain, which your mind is sitting in. And so then your mind, guess what? Anxiety, stress, depression, memory loss, mood swings, brain fog, all the stuff, because of this bottom-up process of unfertile or like not healthy soil that everything's planted in. And so when you're working bottom-up to heal trauma, you start to work in the body first to refertilize the soil of your body so that your brain can start to get healthier, so that your mind can then become healthier and ready to actually process what's stored in your body. And so that's really important to understand in relation to healing trauma. And that's the methodology that we use. I use something called internal family systems is what I'm trained in. And it's a bottom-up strategy or methodology. It's a type of psychotherapy that helps people process what's stored in their body and not just re-experience it, but witness it and be with the part of you that experienced that trauma so that it can then release that trauma in a non-triggered way, in a non-sympathetic, like hyper fight or flight type way, where it doesn't have access to beginning, middle, end type memory. And so being able to reprocess and witness and work with those parts that experience that trauma is huge. You're probably wondering, where does AI and biometrics come in this? So all this stuff is stored in your body. And that's why I had to give all that information to help you understand why like a biometric device like a Whoop can help with this stuff, because what's happened, all this trauma is stored in your body. And so when I am measuring, like I can see when you get anxious, your heart rate variability shifts, your heart rate changes, your body temperature changes, your blood oxygen changes, your sleep patterns change, your stress levels change. All of these data points can be collected through biometric devices like Apple Watches or Whoops and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And your blood glucose changes, like a NutriSense can detect blood glucose changes. And then that can be objectively measured, analyzed, and then there's insights that can be drawn from that type of objective measurement and stuff. And so that's a humongous piece of that's how we get the data, how we use the data, those types of things when we're working with people. So we have an objective measurement of their like mental and emotional health using biometric devices. We have a behavioral measurement, like a subjective report when I'm working with someone, and then I combine the two of those things to help them improve their mental and emotional health through our programs and things, the stuff that I help people through. So that's kind of how we help people with those things. And then the AI component comes in and analyzing that by itself. So
yeah, I just pulled up my phone to look at my Whoop and to look at my my data right now to see. And so it has a new stress monitor on there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Love it.
That's pretty cool. And so I'm at a medium right now.
Nice.
While we're talking, and my heart rate is about 66 right now. So it's a little higher than normal because you're doing activity, you're using your brain. But the point being here is that a lot of times you don't really know if you're stressing. This is even in more extreme examples. You don't know if you're stressing.
Yeah.
A lot of times you just because you don't necessarily see it doesn't mean nothing is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And another point that you made there was there's a book I'm pretty sure it's called The Body Keeps Score.
Oh yeah, Bessel van der Kolk. Love that.
Yeah, The Body Keeps Score. That's a very good book to read on this. And
yes, very very good.
It's crazy to think about that. If you told someone at first that some of your past events and obstacles and failures and unfortunate events, it's not just in your head. It's in your back, or it's in your stomach, or it's your acid reflux and everything. They're like, what are you talking about? This is from X and X thing because this happened. It's like, no, a lot of times our mind can make us sick. Our mind can stress us and manifest. So this manifesting can be from those types of things. And so a lot of times, do you have to get buy-in, or do most of the people coming to you know that these things are completely legit?
More and more, honestly, people are realizing and coming to the realization, either through my content or other things they're reading, that these things are legit. That's a huge focus of my content, is to help people understand this exact thing and how much science and research is behind this. Like there's a ton of neurobiological mechanisms behind this concept, and I'm very, very passionate about pushing that out. So more and more people do come to me more open to this concept. And more people are realizing that, hey, my talk therapy wasn't working. I mean, I get a lot of people that just come to me. It's like, talking about my trauma and talking about this wasn't working. I need to try something different. And so whether it's good or bad, they are coming to me with the perspective of, I need to try something different. What I tried did not work. And they're at a point where they do believe in it because they've tried everything else, and they're at the end of the line, and they're like, okay, screw it. I need to submit to this concept. And when they do, it's very, very effective and therapeutic. So some people come with an open perspective. Other people, you've got to help them experience it, which I can do. You can do this stuff is true. It's not magic. It's not like it's not Fugazi stuff. Like I can walk them through like I can help them talk to a part of themselves in their body, and when they feel that and have that conversation, they're like, holy shit, and their eyes are kind of opened to the stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. As we get ready to wind this down, I want to what are a couple steps that people could do today to kind of take control of their brain more? And I'll use a broad term in case some people may have some trauma to heal. Some people may have some anxiety, some depression. They're kind of related, but they're not related, right? And so what are some kind of just bigger things that we can do to kind of take control of our brains?
For sure. So again, I'm a huge bottom up guy. So the first step I take with all of my clients and people that I work with is something I call the hero's body, which is a framework that I use to help people balance out and fertilize the soil of their body so that they are even ready to start doing some of this work. And so that's something for your mind every day: sleep, maximizing and getting good sleep, exercise, nutrition, social connection, and play. So it's 6 areas. And having a healthy habit pattern routine in each of those areas is super, 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 like that's where research has shown if you have good habits, routines in these areas, your mental and emotional health will improve most significantly. So I suggest people try an MVP, or something I call, which is a minimum vital production for each of those 6 areas. Which is like an MVP is like a laughable version of what you want to do big picture. So if you want to go on a mile run for your exercise, that could be like your standard or your goal or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then your MVP could be, I'm going to go walk a lap around my apartment building. Or if that's too much of because I work with people with depression sometimes, for them, sometimes exercise is literally sitting up on their elbow in their bed. So I literally, or sometimes I've had people do 1 push-up. I helped somebody lose 300 pounds, starting with 1 push-up, 1 sit-up, and 1 squat. That was
Wow.
it. And it was the first time anyone had ever said, given him a realistic thing to achieve. And I trained him to, yeah, I didn't, he trained himself. I suggested and helped him, but he trained himself to show up for himself by doing 1 push-up, sit-up. And he's like, dude, this is easy. I can do this easy now. I was like, perfect. Could you start doing 3? And he's like, yeah, I can do that. And I started really, really realistic and worked him to getting to the gym, but he couldn't start there. Every other person he's worked with in the exercise realm, which is
Yeah.
interesting when you look at data, therapists and like mental health counselors actually
Mm-hmm.
help people lose more weight than exercise scientists or like dietitians sometimes, or not sometimes, statistically, data wise, they do. So it's really interesting. That's an interesting data point. Not trying to blame
No,
anybody.
I
It's
could
just interesting.
I can believe that. I can believe that because a lot of times, I, I'm guilty. I think about when I first started personal training and everything when I was working at a gym, and I had a way of going about things. I was very dictatorial. Being involved in athletics, I treated people like that. Now, I had a very like militarist style to go about things, and I wasn't compassionate. I didn't read on books yet and everything. I didn't care. It's like, you're here, do this thing, do it now. How don't you? It's so easy. It's so easy to do all these things. Like, how can you not? And
Right.
so you didn't have that compassion, that worldview, and a lot of exercise scientists, we live in a bubble, just like in the world of the anti-aging longevity performance world that I'm involved in. It's
Right.
a bubble. So a lot of the stuff that I think is fairly common now, it's not common at all. It sounds still like science fiction to people.
Oh yeah.
But the world, that we exist in, this is just everyday stuff that we talk about every time. So I can hear this because they have therapists, they have much more compassion and empathy, and
Right.
they have the ability to see the world through the lens of whoever they're talking to.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's a huge piece of it. So those MVP type things are what I suggest for people in
Mm-hmm.
those 6 areas. It's a really good baseline as far as starting to heal your brain and work with your brain. That's really, really one of the best things that you could do. Those 6 things. So something for your mind, something for getting good sleep, nutrition, exercise, social connection, and play. That's a really good baseline to, and having MVPs and habit routines. That's where I suggest people start. And then checking in with yourself as far as are there habits, patterns, routines? Are there beliefs that you have that are in the way? Have you been in multiple crappy relationships? Have you been in multiple jobs that you hate or that you burn out? Or do you have this achiever that pushes you? Like, are you more anxious than other people? And really just kind of starting to check in on some of those things
Mm-hmm.
as you're healing your body. And then I suggest finding someone who's trained in internal family systems or somatic experiencing or something like that to help with releasing some of those things and working through some of those things that may be stuck or stored in their body.
Well, I love that. I think that's a great way to end this. We started with nanotechnology way in the
Yeah,
future. And then we ended with some very practical steps that everyone could do. So that's a perfect way that I can't even take credit for. I think that's a perfect way to end this. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm pretty sure we'll be talking in the future again as this stuff advances as the work you're doing continue to evolve and everything. So for now, though, where are some places that listeners can keep up with you?
Yeah, for sure. Mind Brain Body Lab, at Mind Brain Body Lab everywhere. Like any social media you can look at. That's where we're at. And if they want to reach out to me, it's just Cody at mindbrainbodylab.com. If they want to reach out to me directly. Otherwise, social media is the best place to start getting some of our content and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And I will have all of that in the show notes so you can catch that whenever that you have an opportunity to. And until next time, everyone, stay awesome, be limitless, and as always, go be the CEO of your health and your life. Peace.